Welcome to Newsbeacon, your trusted source for breaking headlines, global insights, and sharp analysis from around the world. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Let's talk about the American breakfast. For millions of people across the United States, the day doesn't truly begin until they've sat down to a familiar morning ritual. A plate of eggs, a slice of toast, maybe some crispy bacon, and, of course, a tall, cold glass of orange juice. It's a scene that feels quintessentially American, a comforting start to the day that's been passed down through generations. But have you ever stopped to wonder where that glass of orange juice actually comes from? For many, orange juice is the essential morning wake-up call, a ritual as American as baseball. It's more than just a drink. It's a symbol of energy, health, and the promise of a fresh start. Advertisements have long painted orange juice as the sunshine in your glass, a pure product of American soil and hard work. But the story behind your morning OJ is far more complex and far more global than you might think. Most people imagine their orange juice coming straight from the sun-drenched groves of Florida, where rows of orange trees stretch as far as the eye can see. But the idea that your OJ comes from a sunny Florida grove is mostly a myth. In reality, the orange juice industry in the US has faced enormous challenges in recent years. The truth? US groves can't keep up with demand, battered by disease and storms. Florida's orange trees have been hit hard by a devastating disease called citrus greening, which has wiped out huge portions of the crop. Add to that the increasing frequency of hurricanes and unpredictable weather, and it's no wonder that American farmers are struggling to keep the juice flowing. Enter Brazil, the world's orange juice powerhouse, supplying 60% of US imports. In the rolling hills of São Paulo state, massive groves and high-tech processing plants work around the clock to meet the world's thirst for orange juice. Brazil's climate and scale of production have made it the undisputed leader in the global orange juice market. Your typical carton is a Brazilian-American collaboration, a product of global trade. Oranges are picked in Brazil, juiced, concentrated, and shipped thousands of miles to the US, where they're blended, packaged, and poured into your glass. That product of Brazil label on your juice carton, it's not just a detail, it's a sign of how interconnected our breakfast tables have become. The entire US juice industry depends on this steady flow from Brazil. Every morning, millions of Americans unknowingly rely on a vast network of farmers, factory workers, shippers, and distributors spanning 2 continents. Without this global supply chain, the simple act of pouring a glass of orange juice would be far less certain, and far more expensive. But what happens when politics disrupts this delicate balance? Trade policies, tariffs, and international disputes can all threaten the flow of orange juice from Brazil to the US. A single decision in Washington or Brasilia can send shockwaves through the entire industry, affecting everyone from farmers to families at the breakfast table. This is the story of how a decision in Washington nearly turned your morning juice into a luxury. It's a tale of global connections, economic forces, and the surprising journey your orange juice takes before it ever reaches your glass. In July 2025, the White House stunned the world with a dramatic announcement: a sweeping 50% tariff slapped on a range of Brazilian imports. The news sent shockwaves through global markets, but for Americans, one detail stood out above all. Orange juice was at the very top of the list. For decades, Brazil has been the lifeblood of America's breakfast tables, supplying nearly half of all the orange juice consumed in the United States. Overnight, this staple was thrust into uncertainty. Supermarkets braced for chaos and consumers wondered if their morning glass of OJ would soon become a luxury. This wasn't just a minor policy tweak, it was a sledgehammer to the US juice supply chain. Shelves emptied as panic buying set in, and prices began to climb even before the tariff took effect. The sense of disruption was immediate and palpable. The official reasons for the tariff? A confusing and tangled mix of grievances, each more bewildering than the last. The administration cited Brazil's controversial treatment of its former president, Jair Bolsonaro, as a key factor. Social media was ablaze with heated arguments, fueling the fire of international tensions. Another justification was a supposed trade deficit with Brazil, despite the reality that the US actually enjoys a surplus in trade with its South American partner. Economists scratched their heads trying to make sense of the numbers and the narrative. To many observers, the move looked less like sound economic policy and more like political theater. Politicians delivered fiery speeches, but behind the scenes, industry leaders worried about the real-world consequences. The administration tried to frame the tariff as a matter of national security, insisting it was necessary to protect American interests. But to millions of families it felt like a risky gamble, one that put their beloved breakfast ritual on the line. The clock was ticking. The tariff was set to take effect on August 1st, and the juice industry was on edge. Factory workers feared for their jobs, and business leaders watched nervously as stock prices tumbled. Importers and processors faced an existential threat overnight. Warehouses full of juice sat in limbo, and frantic phone calls filled the air as companies scrambled to adapt to the new reality. The government was risking the entire American juice industry for what many saw as little more than political posturing. The stakes were enormous, and the fallout was just beginning. As the deadline loomed, a dramatic showdown between business leaders and politicians seemed inevitable. The future of America's orange juice and the livelihoods of thousands hung in the balance. In Brazil, the tariff threat hit like a storm. Exporters and politicians were outraged, decades of trade at risk from a sudden arbitrary move. President Lula faced pressure to retaliate or risk economic disaster. Brazil threatened WTO complaints and counter-tariffs but chose patient diplomacy, making their case publicly and letting U.S. industries protest. The livelihoods of hundreds of thousands in Brazil's orange industry hung in the balance. The message Brazil wouldn't take the blow quietly. The next move was up to Washington. To truly grasp the chaos and complexity of American supply chains, you need to look inside the heart of U.S. juice factories. These facilities, humming with activity, seem like the epitome of American industry. Gleaming machines, busy workers, and crates of oranges rolling down conveyor belts. But beneath this surface lies a story that's far more complicated than it appears. Most of the juice labeled as American is actually just packaged here. The real source? Massive shipments of orange juice concentrate from Brazil. Workers pour this concentrate into mixing vats, and the final product is boxed up with familiar U.S. branding. The label might say, "Made in America," but the oranges themselves have traveled thousands of miles to get here. The reason is simple. U.S. orange groves are too small and too few to meet the nation's thirst for juice. American farmers simply can't grow enough oranges to keep up with demand. Instead of competing with Brazil, the U.S. industry has become dependent on it, relying on Brazilian plantations that stretch for miles and produce far more fruit than any American grove could hope to. Some argue that imposing a 50% tariff on Brazilian juice would help American growers. But the reality is, there just aren't enough of them left. Many groves have been abandoned, and the workforce has shrunk. Even with higher prices, there simply isn't the capacity to replace Brazilian imports with homegrown oranges. Instead of helping, such a policy would devastate American juice processors. With their main ingredients suddenly scarce and expensive, factories would be forced to slow down or shut their doors. Hundreds of jobs on the factory floor, in management and in distribution, would be at risk almost overnight. Companies would face a stark choice: absorb massive losses, declare bankruptcy, or pass the soaring costs on to consumers. For many, bankruptcy would be the only option. For shoppers, the price of a simple carton of orange juice could double or even triple almost instantly. The ripple effects would be felt throughout the entire supply chain. Truck drivers, warehouse workers, and grocery clerks, all the people who help get juice from the factory to your fridge, would find their jobs in jeopardy. The disruption would reach every corner of the industry. Ironically, a policy designed to protect American workers could end up destroying the very jobs it was meant to save. Workers would protest, factories would close, and the promise of protecting American jobs would ring hollow. This is a stunning disconnect between political rhetoric and economic reality. Politicians may promise to put America first, but the real-world consequences of their policies can be devastating for the very people they claim to champion. In the end, the American juice industry found itself held hostage, not by foreign competitors, but by the very government that was supposed to protect it. One company refused to go quietly. On July 21, 2025, Johanna Foods, a major U.S. juice processor, sued the White House to stop the tariffs. Supplying most private label OJ in America, Johanna faced a $68 million hit and possible mass layoffs. Their lawsuit argued the tariff was unlawful and a catastrophic threat to real American jobs. They claimed the president lacked legal authority for such drastic action. The case put a human face on the crisis. Real jobs, real families at risk. The legal battle became a rallying cry for the entire industry. The fight moved from politics to the courtroom. Even before tariffs hit, markets panicked. Orange juice futures soared 40% in a month, as traders braced for shortages. Prices were already rising from inflation and crop disease. Tariffs threatened a 20 to 25% jump. A $4.49 carton could soon cost $6, turning a staple into a luxury. The real cost of trade wars passed straight to American shoppers. The policy meant to punish Brazil would hit U.S. wallets hardest. Tariffs rarely hurt their targets, they hurt consumers at home. The checkout counter, not Brazil, would bear the brunt. Orange juice wasn't the only target. The 50% tariff hit a range of Brazilian exports: coffee, beef, even aircraft. Brazil supplies 30% of U.S. coffee. Tariffs would devastate roasters and raise prices. Brazilian beef fills supply gaps. Tariffs would squeeze meat prices and hurt processors. The biggest shock: Embraer aircraft, vital for U.S. regional airlines. A tariff here would disrupt flights and raise ticket prices. The policy threatened entire industries, not just breakfast. It was economic whack-a-mole, with American consumers and businesses in the crosshairs, all for a political dispute. With the deadline looming, the White House blinked. On July 30, 2025, a new executive order excluded orange juice and Embraer aircraft from tariffs. The administration tried to save face, but it was a clear retreat. Lawsuits, industry backlash, and economic warnings forced the reversal. Markets rallied, relief swept through juice and airline industries. The most damaging tariffs were quietly dropped. The government had underestimated the domestic blowback. The crisis ended not with a bang, but with a list of exemptions. It was policymaking by reaction, not strategy. The lesson: ignore economic reality at your peril. What's the takeaway from this orange juice saga? Our world is deeply interconnected. Your breakfast depends on global trade. Tariffs are blunt tools that often backfire, hurting domestic industries and consumers. The real losers in trade wars are usually at home, not abroad. The reversal happened because businesses and consumers spoke up. Government decisions ripple through millions of lives, often in unexpected ways. The humble glass of OJ became a symbol of global interdependence. In trade, think twice before squeezing your allies.